Is there any hand raised? Is that somebody that needs to come? Oh, okay. All right. Okay. I would like to call to order the Gig Harbor City Council meeting of Monday, February 13th, 2023. The time is 5:31 p.m. I will do a roll call from my far left. Councilmember Wook. Here. Councilmember Storsett.
Here, but it's not working. Oh, it's not plugged in. There we go.
Oh, that would help. Make sure my mics are plugged in. And turned on.
Here.
Okay, perfect. Councilmember Woodburg.
Here.
Councilmember Likens. Here. Councilmember Henderson.
Here.
Councilmember Martin.
Here.
And Councilmember Barber.
Here.
Okay, great. Would you all please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible. Thank you. Before we begin this council meeting, I would like to recognize that we are gathered on not only the ancestral and traditional lands of the Squabash Band of the Puyallup Tribe of Indians, but also on the site of one of the largest and longest standing historic villages of their people, the original inhabitants of the Gig Harbor area. Council, are there any changes to the agenda this evening? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, council. So moving right on to the mayor's report this evening. I have some pictures that I wanted to show you all briefly. I had the very great privilege of attending the Night to Shine event on Friday night, the 10th. And it was held at the Tom Taylor YMCA. And it's a night for people of all ages with special needs to be treated to a prom night. And they were treated like royalty. And all of them at the end of the evening walked the red carpet and were crowned king and queen. And it was just fabulous. And there may be some technical difficulties with the pictures, but it's okay. Something else, but it was so much fun. Thank you to Diane Bertram, especially for all of that she did. We had other staff that were there, police officers that were helping with the evening, and it was just wonderful. I read a proclamation while I was there and presented it to the leader. So this was during the dance party at the very end. These may not be in order, but they had these huge balloons that were just, everybody was having so much fun playing with these balloons, and they would just knock you right out if you didn't know they were coming. So this is them coming down the red carpet. I got a couple pictures of them coming down. There's Diane and I went in the karaoke room. So they had karaoke, they had, catered everything. There was food in every place where these people were, there was food. And it was so amazing. And I think this gal, she was busting out Whitney Houston's "I Will Always Love You." Just amazing, perfectly in tune. She was phenomenal. So it was really awesome. That was so fun. I think there was more. And then we had Belle and Sonia there, and they were doing the crowning at the end of the night. And so this was me with the princesses and one of the other princesses that was there that evening who had just been crowned queen. So it was very neat. I think that might be the last one. So anyway, it was such an honor to be there. Thank you to the Tim Tebow Foundation for allowing this fun night, for our very special members of our community, and again to city staff and our police for assisting as well. I've been down in Olympia several times over the last couple of weeks, meeting with legislators, testifying on different bills. So I'll continue to do that as long as this legislative session is going, and which I think is till April something. I always forget the date, but end of April. And then on Wednesday and Thursday of this week, myself, Katrina, and Katrina Knudsen, our city administrator, and I'll introduce our staff in a minute. And 4 council members will be going down to for AWC, Association of Washington Cities, Action Days is what it's called. So we have different sessions we'll be attending. We'll all be meeting with our legislators and enjoying a day, 2 days actually down at the Capitol. So that will be exciting. And then happy to announce the Gigabyte podcast is coming back, only this time it's in video and audio format. And so it will return and be published this Friday night or afternoon. Very excited, and will come out on the 2nd and 4th Fridays of each month. So it will be a featured guest each week from the community. Could be a city staff person, could be a member of the community. And then the last 5 minutes of each segment will be featuring a local business, sitting down with a local business owner, whether new or existing, and talking about their business and how we can support. So I'm really excited for that. So stay tuned. And with that, I will turn it over to our city administrator, Katrina Knudsen, for her report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council and members of the public. Noting how many folks are here tonight, I will make this very abbreviated. Wanted to let the community know that on April 22nd at Gig Harbor High School, there will be oh,
Yeah, your microphone's really
apologize.
soft.
can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay. On April 22nd at Gig Harbor High School, there will be a Peninsula Emergency Preparedness Coalition, or PEPC, emergency fair. The city is proud to be sponsoring, we're a proud sponsor of this event, and our police department will have a table with city information on emergency services there. So again, April 22nd, if you'd like to learn about how to prepare for earthquakes, forest fires, floods, or landslides, you are encouraged to attend that. And Mayor, I will wrap up right now due to the amount of public that are here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I will now open up the public comment period on non-agenda items. So anything that is not listed on our agenda tonight, you can come forward to the podium and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And if you could state your name and address for the record. Just come right up. If I see your hand, I'll call on you, but otherwise you
Okay.
can just kind of form a line or come on up.
You can hear me, I guess. Okay. Hi, my name is Vicky Tracy. I live on Regatta Court, 3968 Regatta Court. I'm coming here tonight to ask you folks if you might not consider an ordinance regarding the feeding of wild animals. I think most of you have the letter that I wrote to my neighbor. I've been struggling with this for almost 2 years. This person just feeds them, bringing in the rats and the squirrels. And, finally, I did ask her, I talked to her about it, and we did have an email exchange, Mayor. And it to absolutely no avail because she loves the animals so much. But, anyone who is even aware of what you should be doing with wild animals knows that you shouldn't be feeding them. But as a result of her actions, I just had to spend $7,000 to get my crawl space totally redone because the squirrels chewed through, ruined everything under my house. And, I understand that it's tough to deal with someone who's doing something on their own property, but what about me and others like me, that are suffering because of what this person has been doing? So, there are a whole lot of other things that I could have spent $7,000 on, plus they, these squirrels are in my yard digging holes every single day. And I have to chase them away. And, my yard's a mess. They dig everything up, and now the underneath of my house too. So I'm hoping that you can at least discuss it and see if there's some kind of ordinance maybe that could be put in place. I guess that's it, but I think you know what I mean, but thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak on an item not on the agenda? feel free to come forward. Okay, anyone watching online, again, thank you to those that are watching online. If you wish to speak, you can push the *9 button on your phone or the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Okay, I see. It looks like Emily and O'Malley was first. Again, this is an item not on the agenda. And you can state your name and address for the record, please. And you have 3 minutes. Are
Were
there-
you addressing Bonnie O'Malley?
Oh, I can hear you now. Thank you, Bonnie.
Okay. I believe it was Bonnie O'Malley, 8101 Bay Ridge Avenue, Gig Harbor, 98332. I believe it was my original letter where I referred to the STR Epic as a tempest in a teapot. So here we are 1.5 years later and it's still boiling and I want to know why.
This is Steve Chapman. Would you like me to go ahead and address the council?
I can't hear you. Is there any way you can turn it up, Josh? Okay.
I'm sorry, that was garbled. Am I allowed to go ahead?
Just give us 1 second. What you have to say here. Are you still with us, Mr. Chapman?
Okay, so my name is Steve Chapman. I live at 2829 Harborview Drive, so right downtown. My wife and I purchased this house about 10 years ago, planning on moving into it after we retired. But during the time that before I retired, we actually would use it as a vacation home. And we also signed up with Vacasa to rent it out as a short-term rental.
Short-term rentals. So I will close the public comment on non-agenda items. And we will go to our first item of new business, which is the first reading of ordinance 1508, amending Gig Harbor Municipal Code 9.24, relating to alcohol in parks and park operating hours. And this report comes to us from our Parks Manager, Jennifer Harrow. Hi, Jennifer.
Mayor, good evening, council. Can you hear me
Yeah.
okay?
I think people can hear you better.
Thanks. Is that all right?
That's better.
All right. So we're here today for the first reading of the ordinance, so no action will be taken tonight. But the city was approached by a nonprofit that rents space from the city at a city-owned building. And our current parks code does not allow the consumption or serving of alcohol at city parks at all. So this proposed code amendment would allow exceptions to the prohibition of alcohol in leased buildings as long as they comply with all liquor and cannabis board rules. And it would allow for amending of leases to nonprofits that we rent to allow alcohol for fundraising events, and then private parties that are allowed under the terms of their lease. So currently we are proposing adding a sentence to chapter 9.24.020 of the Parks Code that would allow It says that alcohol is permitted except if consumed in a leased area or rental area pursuant to the terms contained in the lease or rental agreement. And then it adds that alcohol consumed pursuant to one of the above exceptions must be in accordance with the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board permit and license requirements. So that's section 020, and then 924-040 will add an exception to the dusk to dawn park hours for an exception if part of a lease or rental agreement. So those are the two changes we're proposing. And in the future, the leases for the subject buildings will come before the council for approval. So the next time it will come up is at the February 27th meeting for the second reading.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Any clarifying questions from Councilmember Likens?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Parks Director, I just wanted, Harrow, I wanted to clarify the two buildings that this will apply to. Could you repeat that again, just so
Oh,
the
sure.
general public
I didn't
knows?
say them
Yeah.
this time, but there's 3 buildings affected actually. 2
Okay.
operated by the Gig Harbor Boat Shop, their boat shop building, and then what's known as the Boatyard House, the Brick House. They're a little bit different because they rent out the Brick House for events. So that would allow people to serve alcohol at events in accordance with the liquor board requirements. And then the other is the Scansy Net Shed.
Okay, thank you. And just to follow up, in order to serve alcohol, they would need to apply to the Washington State Liquor Banquet or Special Private Occasion License in order to do that in those 3 areas, correct?
That is correct. And there are
Okay.
2 different types of licenses that would, depending on the event. One's a banquet permit and
Okay.
then there's a special occasion license. So depending on what kind of event it is.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other clarifying questions from council? Okay, seeing none, I will open up the public comment on this agenda item only. If anyone in the audience wishes to speak on this agenda item, you can come forward now. Okay, anyone in our online audience, if you wish to speak on this agenda item only, you can press the *9 button on your phone or the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. Okay, seeing none, I will close the public comment on this agenda item. And there will be no action taken because it's first reading. So thank you again, Jennifer, and we look forward to seeing you back on the 27th.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving into our second item of the evening, our public hearing and first reading of ordinance 1507 related to short-term rentals. And again, so this is a first reading as well, so no action will be taken by council at the end of this public hearing. Just as a reminder, there are a lot of people here this evening, and thank you all so much for being here, and thank you to our online audience for being here as well. I wanted to introduce our city staff. Our city clerk, Josh Stecker, is sitting right over here on the left. City Administrator Katrina Knudsen, our city attorney, Daniel Kelly, our Community Development Director, Carl DeSimas. I'm very tongue-tied. And Jeremy Hammer, Principal Planner.
Associates.
Associate. This issue. Chief is over there too. I see some interest to you as well. Thank you for being here. So if there is someone, the rules of our public hearing are a little bit different from public comment. I will not ask you to state your address, just your name when you come forward. It is one person speaking on behalf of a large group. If you do come forward, if you state that you're speaking on behalf of a group, then I will ask those members that you're speaking for to raise their hands so that I can confirm that you are all in the same group and that someone is speaking for you. If you do raise your hand and you allow someone to speak for you, then you will not be able to come forward and speak on your own. So just be sure that if someone is representing you and you raise your hand, that you know that that person is the one speaking for you. If you are speaking on behalf of a group, you will have 5 minutes to speak. And if you're speaking as an individual for yourself, you'll have the 3 minutes to speak. So if there's any questions throughout the process, we can address those, and I may also lean on our city clerk a bit too as well. So with that, I will turn it over to our Community Development Director, Carl DeSimas, for the staff report.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Good evening and good evening, City Council, members of the public. Thank you for coming. It's a nice turnout. Happy to see you all here. Give us just one moment while we get the screen share up here. I have a very brief PowerPoint for you.
Great.
So again, we're here this evening to discuss or to hear first reading of Ordinance 1507 relating to short-term rental regulations. So to begin, just a little bit of background. In January, September 7th of 2021, the Planning and Building Committee discussed this issue at a regularly scheduled meeting and decided to bring it forward to the full council. Council then passed a motion directing staff to draft an ordinance that would place a moratorium on the acceptance of new lodging level 1 applications. The council adopted Ordinance 1467 and extended the moratorium through ordinances 1484 and 1497. These moratoria are in effect for 6 months respectively from the effective date of each ordinance. The moratorium is currently set to expire on March 12th, 2023. Planning Commission, beginning in January 2022, studied the matter at 10 study sessions, including 2 public hearings on draft regulations. They also requested an early public comment period after their first study session to hear the community's concerns. Ultimately, the Planning Commission wanted more time to study short-term rental regulations and hone in on a set of regulations they could support and recommend to council. Unfortunately, to do so would have required another extension, which was not supported at the time. As council took up the matter, some recent case law was found, needing additional review that led to a 3rd extension of the moratorium after all. Overall, and leading up to tonight's hearing, the City Council has reviewed this matter at 4 study sessions, weighing public input, staff recommendations, and research. The city has received nearly 400 written comments. Those comments have been made available to council and the public via the project website and/or have been included in meeting and study session packets throughout this process. For tonight's hearing, an additional 39 written comments have been submitted in writing. Some of those are included in the packet, while others are only included on the project website. All have been shared with City Council in one way or another. Just briefly, I want to discuss the process that we've gone through here. The legislative process, essentially. At the time this process began back in 2021, the council makeup was a bit different. Also at that time, council utilized smaller committees to study specific items that would result in reports and recommendations back to the full council. This issue followed the process, and the full council determined that it should be studied at a planning commission, who would then bring back a recommendation to be considered and potentially adopted by ordinance. This is a typical local legislative process. Staff supports the process through guidance and professional recommendations based on the direction of the elected officials and advisory commissions. Staff also ensures the public is heard and that a legal process is followed. To this end, a SEPA determination of non-significance was issued for this action, a non-project action, and the Department of Commerce was noticed, giving state agencies an opportunity to review the comment. SEPA was not appealed, and the city has received no comments from the state agencies. Throughout this process, staff has maintained a project website that makes public all relative documents and also the project schedule and meeting archive. Staff has also maintained an interested parties roster with the names and contact information of those in the public who have either commented or asked to be kept aware of the process. Very briefly, what the issue is. Right now in our current code, lodging level 1 is undefined, or I apologize. Short-term rentals are undefined, and they are defined as a lodging level 1. Lodging level 1 is defined as a single-family residence which provides overnight lodging for guests and may provide meals for overnight guests not to exceed 5 rooms. As with other communities across the state and the country, the number of short-term rentals advertised within the city appeared to be on the rise at the time that council was reviewing this at Planning and Building Committee. Throughout the process, we have worked to discern the actual number of short-term rentals existing in the city, but have not been able to come to any concrete numbers. They appear to range from 30 to 50, depending on where the data comes from. Staff believe the number to be closer to 30. Of those, 5 are legally permitted as lodging level 1s. So what does Ordinance 1507 do? In line with council's direction at a study session on January 19th, where 4 options were proposed, this ordinance does the following: defines short-term rentals and includes them as a new land use type in the city. Also, this ordinance redefines lodging level 1, so a clear distinction between the 2 land uses can be drawn. Creates a new permit that would be processed as a type 2 procedure. This procedure is already established in the city and requires a public notice of application, public comment period, an administrative decision where no public hearing would be required, and an opportunity for appeal to the city's hearing examiner. This ordinance provides clear expectations for the administration of the permit and the annual renewal of the required business license. It also provides clear expectations for how the short-term rental should operate. It allows the use in all zones where dwelling units are already permitted, and it allows for only 1 short-term rental per permittee. Finally, it requires the permittee to maintain ownership of the short-term rental and possess a valid City of Gig Harbor business license. One item we did forget to include in this ordinance is the repealing of the current moratorium. If council chooses to bring this back for second reading, staff will make that correction on the 27th. A few additional items of note. Liveaboards have been removed from this ordinance in light of the fact that they are already regulated use in the Shoreline Master Program, and therefore we found it did not make sense to regulate them within this ordinance at this time. Staff report provides more detail on that topic. Also, in the January 19th study session, council directed staff to begin considering ways to track the short-term rental program over the year following adoption and report back to council quarterly. Staff have begun thinking about this and plan to develop a website that will be presented to council at an upcoming study session should this ordinance be adopted. A good neighbor policy has been included in tonight's packet as noted in the ordinance. The good neighbor policy is not part of the ordinance, but is a required component of the future short-term rental permit, and therefore it's an important piece. Also, you will note that the agenda bill for this evening, staff has proposed a permit fee for the short-term rental permit. Staff plans to bring back a resolution on February 27th, amending the city's current permit fee schedule to include this fee. Finally, an FAQ, or frequently asked questions, has been included with tonight's packet, providing some answers and clarity around a few of the common questions we have been hearing. The FAQ also has been posted to the project website and emailed to the project's interested parties list. Lastly, after the public hearing, staff recommends council direct staff to schedule Ordinance 1507 for second reading at the February 27th council meeting. That concludes my report, Mayor, and I'm available for any questions, as is Jeremy Hammer.
Thank you so much. Clarifying questions from council. Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Director DeSimas. This is very well done presentation. I was going to ask you a question tonight. You know, I've read through all 22 pages of the code, and it's challenging as an engineer. I was wondering if you could sort of go through I don't want a huge detailed step-by-step process of how any resident would go and obtain an STR permit, but can you give us some general outlines? I think some of the letters that we've been seeing come in, there may be some misunderstanding of the process or how it gets done. And so maybe just speak to some of that, just walk us through how that might happen. Like, where do I start? How much is it going to cost? At least if we have that information right now. Time frame, restrictions, things like that. I think it'd be good for everybody to get on the same page right now. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. Yeah, I can briefly go over that. So this would be a type 2 permit process. And we would utilize our regular master application, which is the same application we use for all land uses. The application can either be downloaded from our website, it can be filled out online. We can accept an electronic submittal, or someone can come into the counter here at Civic Center and submit the application to us as well. Either way, it's just fine. We do require the fee is paid to complete the application. We're proposing the fee be $650, which is in line with several other type 2 permits that we have in the fee schedule. We've laid out the criteria for a complete application within this draft ordinance. Once we've accepted that application and determined it complete, we would provide a notice of completeness to the applicant, which would kick off a 14-day comment period. The city would release a notice of application. So there would be a requirement for a notice board on site. We would mail the notice out to all property owners within 300 feet of the site, and we would publish that in the paper. That would then begin the review process at that time. So then we get into the back and forth with the applicant if there's any additional materials that we need in order to complete our review. If not, then we could go to notice of decision fairly quickly afterward. I would not expect these permits to take that long to process. Our typical process time, as mandated by state statute, is 120 days. And that's 120 days while the city is reviewing it, not while we're waiting for revisions. Again, I don't think that these permits will take that long to review. But you know, I don't want to hazard a guess either at any specific number of days. So once the application is ready for approval, staff would prepare an administrative decision. So this decision would be made by the director, so myself or designee, so principal planner or planner could make that decision. We are a pretty small shop, so we're all looking at the applications all the time anyway. So once we're ready for that, we'd sign up the decision, and then we'd have a notice of decision that would go out. Again, there's a 14-day appeal period on that. If it's appealed, it would go to the hearing examiner for a decision on the appeal.
Just a couple little clarifying questions. Would there be any studies like traffic impact analyses or stormwater impact analyses, or any other kinds of things like that that could catch somebody kind of off guard thinking, okay, I'm going to pay $650, but now I've got to do a $5,000 traffic study?
So in speaking with engineering about this, right now there would likely be no sewer or water studies required. Transportation is the one place where we're still working on the policy. And it is depended in the past on the site. So speaking with the city engineer, they've been talking with other jurisdictions, and it appears a lot of jurisdictions are trying to figure out a policy on this. So that's still in process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Wook.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for your presentation. I have a couple of questions here. How many short-term rentals would be allowed on each block in a residential neighborhood in the city of Gig Harbor?
There's no limitation according to this ordinance.
Okay, no limitation on the number of short-term rentals on any block, on any street in Gig Harbor residential neighborhood at this time?
The only limitation is that we would only allow one short-term rental permit per permittee.
Okay. Is anyone required to live in these short-term rentals?
No,
So no one's required to live in these short-term rentals.
there is no owner occupancy requirement in this ordinance.
Thank you. Is there any limit on how often these commercial short-term rentals can be rented for?
The only limitation is less than 30 days.
Short-term rentals are rental units less than 30 days. Is there any limit on the number of times a short-term rental may be rented in a residential neighborhood?
No, there's no limitation on that.
Okay. Our Gig Harbor citizens are super proud to live in Gig Harbor. You're here tonight. If these folks who live in the city limits want to use their address when they make their public comment, is that allowed?
Clerk Snicker.
Yes, commenters can voluntarily provide their address if they choose to.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Lundberg.
Just a couple clarifying comments, Director. The administrative decision by the Community Development Director and you, just to make people feel better, that's, or me feel better, is that just a matter of looking at the boxes that have been ticked? Or there's no arbitrary decision about this can get it and this person can't? It's just, they fulfilled all the requirements, done.
That's correct, Councilmember Rodenberg.
And in this ordinance tonight, there's actually part of it says that we will relook at this ordinance in a year's time after we've done a study on how did it work for that year. So my question is, and I can't support something that you say the traffic impact study will be figured out. I would like to say that there will be no impact study required that first year. And then let's look at it in a year, because that's kind of a restrictive and very costly thing for someone to do upfront in order prior to getting a permit. So I would suggest that it doesn't say it's required in this ordinance, but I'd hate to see it put in between now and when we approve it. So that's all the comments I have, other than thank you for all the hard work that you put into this, you and your whole team.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rodenberg, we will work on getting the staff answer to the traffic generation memo. I believe Director Langholm had to leave this evening. So we will make sure that we get that. The reason it's not in the ordinance this evening is because that traffic generation information is subject to not the zoning regulations. So it's within the Public Works Code. And so we'll need to have staff coordinate on that, but we'll get counsel and answer and make sure that the interested parties all receive that as well.
If at all, I'd like to see it put off the first year while we're trying to figure it out
Thank you.
if everything's working.
Thank you. Councilmember Likens.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions. I'll just go through them individually if I could. First, I also want to echo the Councilmember Rodenberg's comments about thanking you all for your hard work on this. I also want to thank everyone who wrote, who showed up, who have reached out. People really care about their community, and we're trying to hear all sides of this issue. We're trying to take everything into account and come up with fair and balanced regulations, and I appreciate the hard work. Also, shout out to the Planning Commission, 11 meetings, 2 public hearings, and they really tried to, come up with things that they could recommend to us, and they were struggling for the same reasons that we were in looking for more information. So my first question is on your including of the limiting 1 per owner or 1 per household, so to speak. Was the goal of that to keep corporate interests out because they tend to buy up multiple at one time historically with short-term rentals nationally?
Yeah, I think that's one goal of that decision or of that inclusion. I think another is just to mitigate, generally hope to mitigate the number of these and the proliferation throughout the city.
Okay, and of the ones that we know of or approximately believe we know of that are operating in the city now, there's no evidence that they're corporate ownership involved in this, primarily Gig Harbor citizens?
There is no evidence that it's corporate ownership.
Okay, and you said approximately 30, and how many households total are there? Total households, do you have that number off your head?
Oh, in the city,
Yeah. in the city,
citywide,
yeah.
approximately 5,000.
Okay, so a very small percentage. Any crimes that have been committed by anyone staying in a short-term rental historically in the city?
We have no record of that.
Okay, any police reports of complaints of issues that were justified?
We have no record of those specifically related to short-term rental properties.
Okay, so there has been none. The other thing is that you mentioned the tracking. I know we talked about this in the study session, but I believe it was Councilmember Martin who brought up the possibility of having a website or something to communicate this. This would be available to all, is that correct?
That's correct, Councilmember
Okay.
Likens. It would be a publicly available website. We're still working on the details of what would be on that website. And we, of course, would
Okay.
work with council to determine what that ends up looking like.
Okay,
We would also have quarterly reports back to council on any of the findings that we collect over the course of the year.
okay. And if in one of those quarterly reports, for example, we saw that there were several short-term rentals being developed in a certain area, at any time, we as council could stop and relook at this and consider further limitations, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilmember Martin, did you have a question?
Councilmember Lycan asked a couple of questions I was going to ask. So
Okay.
I'm all good. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Councilmember Rodenberg, did you have any further questions? Okay. All right, Councilmember Book.
Yes, thank you. One question, if it is an LLC or corporation that buys short-term rentals, can each member of the LLC have one short-term rental?
Currently, as far as we know, yes.
So each member of an LLC can have their own short-term rental. And as a corporation, I guess, how does it work with the corporation? And members of the corporation can have their own short-term rental as well, one each?
Yes, I believe, if I understand your question correctly, that's kind of the same question, I think, because we're
Well,
talking about.
probably is, I guess. So each member of an LLC or corporation, each member can have their own short-term rental.
One short-term rental permit per applicant.
And so each member of an LLC could be their own applicant.
I suppose they could.
Yes, they could. Is that right?
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Storsett.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So just, I guess, one question here, and so many questions have been asked. I know you guys are all looking forward to a chance to speak as well. So, so thank you for being here. A few things that I think will probably come up in the public comment, but a question that I have is, really around where we came up with the one-to-one. And we can obviously see that there is an alternate to how to go about doing that, to start an LLC, for example. So I'm not necessarily in favor of the one-to-one. I think there should be some type of a number. I don't want someone buying 25 places in Gig Harbor, but I would look to see if, how many people would be impacted because they have more than one STR, for example, maybe something that they've had for a long time. So I think that's something that we all need to consider. So, not a question, more of a comment. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Likens.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is a question for both Jeremy or excuse me, forgive me, for Community Development Director DeSimas and possibly our City Attorney Kenny. Is it possible that we could somehow include language in regards to Councilmember Wook's question that we could ask a person to identify as a part of a corporation, name the members of the corporation, and that you could limit to one per corporate interest or group ownership?
Councilmember, we talked about that, and there are different structures of corporate entities and people that have varying interests or involvement with those entities.
Sure.
And so to write out a rule that would cover each type of involvement in the various types of corporate entities, which is not, I mean, it's not just one that would have these, is actually quite challenging when you sit down and think about it. And so the end result was one per applicant. And the applicant has to represent the owner, right, of that property. But because somebody could have a small financial interest, could have a governing role in the LLC, LLP, whatever the structure is, it's actually pretty hard to get down to where do you draw the line on who actually is involved and to what extent do they need to be involved in order to cross that threshold determination. So we did think about that per council's direction, and it's actually quite challenging. And so that's why it's at one per applicant right now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rodenberg.
Yes, I agree with council members Dorset's comment on the one-to-one, since there's so many various ways to get around that. Why fool ourselves that it can't be? You could set up an LLC in a couple hours on the internet. So I would like to, when this comes before council, I think I'll probably ask for an amendment to, it's been said that maybe one short-term rental is to help augment someone's income, help them pay the taxes on a family building they don't want to see lose it. So I would probably make an amendment to the ordinance that the second permit have a higher fee and the third permit have even a higher fee, because when you get to 2 or 3 permits, then you realize that somebody's doing this as a business and it's not to serve to just restore a family home.
So Councilmember, I'll take that as a question during questions.
It is
here.
a question.
That's
That's fine.
Yeah, of course. I just, so fees got to represent the costs that are incurred by the city and the review and everything. So we would not have a tiered level simply as a deterrent, if you will. The permit fees are all for the processing of those permits. And so if you're looking for some sort of incremental, permit review for more than one, when we get to the comment period from council and your continued deliberation, you could make a motion to explore that, and staff could come up with some options for you. But it wouldn't just merely be more dollars for the sake of dollars.
Sure, I wouldn't expect that $200 more would deter someone that's in business, just as a way to recoup more fees, because it's going to cost us more money.
Thank you. Councilmember Martin.
Thank you. Director DeSimas, there were a couple comments that I read from the public that had sent information in. And some of the questions were fairly consistent in regards to, would there be a requirement for someone who owned the property to live there, say 183 days out of the year? As well as, can you mandate someone actually living in the city of Gig Harbor if they're going to have a short-term rental? Could you give us a little information on, I know that you and your team reviewed that information and those questions as well.
So in answer to the first question about the number of days that we could require someone to live in the short-term rental. So that's sort of would be what we were calling an owner occupied or a primary residence under a previous iteration of this ordinance. And that certainly can be done. So, and as to the first question, yes, we could do that. The second question, I believe, is relative to the dormant commerce clause that we dealt with. It was a case out of Louisiana, whereby they were requiring that someone live within the city limits in order to own a short-term rental. I think that's how the case went. You're looking at me like I got that wrong. So
Just clarification, it had to do with ownership. And so neither of those issues are being brought up by the current code. And so if council directed at this consideration or a future consideration to go down those paths, council will have all of that information available, but those things are not implicated by the current code as outlined by the presentation. So we're not going down that path, and depending on how that were to be written and directed by council, that could change that analysis. So I would hesitate to say yes or no to either of those questions because we don't have draft code in front of us that speaks to that directly. Though if we did and we needed to have that conversation, we absolutely would provide that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Rodenberg.
Yes, we actually talked about that in our work session, time and time again. And the last time we had a work session, staff was directed by council to not have that provision in our ordinance. So he did a good job of not putting it in the ordinance. I don't see why we want to talk about it again. Council agreed, I think almost unanimously not to have that in there. So why backtrack now? Just a comment, not a question.
Let's try to keep it to clarifying questions if there are any remaining during this clarifying question period. Councilmember Martin, did you have another one?
Just to clarify, that was just more for edification for everyone here that was in the room. So that was to clarify why I was asking that question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Councilmember Henderson?
Thank you, Mayor. Another question, Director DeSimas. Could you kind of go over a little bit about how the city might plan to deal with non-compliance issues with parties, or, I mean, clearly we haven't had very many based on no police calls, or few, if any, police calls. So how would the city within the code that's being proposed tonight, how would the city deal with non-compliance?
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson. So we would deal with non-compliance in the same way that we deal with non-compliance and for all land uses within our code. We have a code enforcement officer. We take complaints or on a complaint-based basis. So if the public would like to lodge a complaint, we would investigate it, substantiate it, and then determine whether or not there's actually a violation. As far as noise complaints go, those are often going to the police, of course. So the police would have record, and we would work with the police department, especially when we're renewing that annual business license, to determine if there had been any substantiated violations in that regard.
Okay. Councilor Rodenberg, did you have another question? Okay. Is it a
yeah.
question? It needs to be a question.
It's a clarification.
Clarification question?
So about noise complaints, that's very hard to enforce. Someone can say the neighbor's too loud, but to make it an actionable offense against the code, you have to have listening equipment. You have to measure decibels and all that kind of thing. And that's a very difficult one. So you just, I guess the chief can say that I'm not right if he wants, if he dares, but but I think it's true that it's very hard to get a noise complaint actionable.
I do dare, Councilmember Roden. But respectfully, we can enforce noise ordinances a little bit more easily than sound measuring equipment. There's distances that like stereos can be audible from residences or buildings, things like that.
Thank you. My apology.
Mayor, the past two questions have been about code enforcement, and I think to get to Councilmember Henderson's question, the reason that there is no code enforcement language in the ordinance that's proposed this evening is because we're relying on Gig Harbor Municipal Code Section 1916, which is our enforcement of land use codes. And as Director DeSimas indicated, this would be a new land use that's added, and so it would be the same process as all other land uses within the city.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Henderson, do you have another question?
Clarification. Sorry, Director DeSimas. Sorry. Would there be any kind of like a 3 strikes out policy on non-compliance? I can understand that we'd want to deal with it in a very similar way that we do with any kind of non-compliance within the city. But since this involves business licenses and kind of businesses would we consider some sort of a 3 strikes, you lose your business license kind of a thing?
Currently, that's not in the code that we're proposing here tonight. I will note that council has directed staff to look at our code compliance policy in general and come back with some recommendations on how to make it stronger. And that would include a look at our civil penalties. So the entire policy. And so this new land use type would also be included in that discussion.
So something could be added analogous to that.
Absolutely, council
Okay,
member.
thank you.
In addition to that, if a property owner is not maintaining the stipulations of the permit, the city has the right to revoke that permit. And so that's something that we could look at if there's continuous issues with one particular STR.
Thank you. Councilmember Barber.
Yes, just following on the same line, the good neighbor policy. Do infractions of the good neighbor policy fall within those same parameters of the enforcement policy?
Not necessarily, no. The good neighbor policy is just that. It's policy. It's not code language. So violations of the good neighbor policy would not necessarily constitute a code violation. However, the good neighbor policy is based on the codes that we have and the performance regulations in the code. So likely there would be some nexus there if there were an issue.
Thank you. Councilmember Likens.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just a quick clarifying question, just for the record. In our upcoming comprehensive plan update, which I believe is later this year, short-term rentals will be a part of that comp plan update, and there will be extensive community outreach, multimodal community outreach to all involved. Is that correct?
That's correct, council member.
Okay, and we have budgeted, if I remember, I believe it was a large amount, like $400,000 for a consultant to do this comprehensive plan review.
That's correct.
Okay, and that would include looking at land use and ensuring availability of housing types, correct?
Correct, council member.
Okay, and how short-term rentals might affect that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilmember Wook.
Yes, thank you. Follow up a question to the good neighbor policy. If the council wanted to, could we codify the good neighbor policy?
Yes, you could.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Another clarifying question. I see that we did have the good neighbor policy in there. Is there any kind of a non-discriminatory policy, or does that get covered by like state and federal laws that somebody would have to post something on their door that says we cannot discriminate against people that we don't want to rent to?
That's taken care of by state and federal law, just as any other business is prohibited from discrimination.
Okay, Councilmember Wook. Oh, no problem. No problem. Okay, not seeing any other lights. Quick question for council. I don't want to pause the public hearing in the middle. Would you like to take a 5-minute break ahead of the public hearing? Yes, yes. Okay, so we will reconvene at 6:35. Thank you. Okay. 13th. Speak. Just you, yes, you got it.
Ms. Mary Anderson, and I just would like to thank you all for having this hearing. And I'd like to address one of the concerns or questions of Councilman Likens brought up. And in the summer of 2020, our next door neighbor has they live in the house, but they have like a mother-in-law apartment downstairs with a separate entrance and registered with Airbnb. And none of us in the community knows, there's just 14 homes in there, but none of them knew that it was going on until the police had to be called because there was a fight that broke out at 2:00 in the morning with two women screaming and fighting, and they were this drunken brawl in the driveway. Another person that was in the house broke out a window in a house not next door but across the street. This was in a cul-de-sac, and the house right across the street broke out the window of a pickup truck. And it woke up his 3-year-old son. I mean, he was traumatized hearing all this screaming, and then the police cars had to come. And they put their house up for sale. They were very good neighbors. So when we found out what was going on, we all called Airbnb and they had them delisted. But it was, very disturbing to have this violence taking care in this nice neighborhood. And, there's no register. Who do you call? Who do the police register with this? Would they send it to your office if there was a infraction with violence? How are you going to track that? Because there's just no way. I tried to pull it up online just to bring a copy, and there's not there's nothing trackable. So anyway, that was just something that it may not happen very often, but one time is too many, to have people damage, property damage. And so that's what I would just came to give you all consideration to maybe keep the moratorium in place for a while. And I would just thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Yes. And please state your name for the record and just if you would like.
Ron Pearson. Just a couple of quick questions. Is there a limit to the number of residents, occupants that can be at a residence when you do these, like on any particular night?
So unfortunately, I can't take comments. We can't answer questions at this time. Questions now, if I'd like to see.
Okay. Yes, see.
Questions down.
Okay, I'll do that. And then I guess the other question, I'll make it into a comment then, in that respect. I think we ought to be limiting the number of short-term rentals, for example, the number of days per year, if we even permit it at all. I know people have talked about 30-day rentals and stuff, but I mean, for any particular residence, I think it should be possible at least that we could put a limit on the number just so that somebody's not renting it out all the time. So something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
John Anderson, and thank you very much for what you've done to pull this forum together. I've been a grateful beneficiary of the short-term rental business. I don't own any property, but I travel widely, usually with business groups of people, and they've really been a great experience for us. However, one of the concerns that I would ask you to undertake is this. When you've made it open and available for a concerned neighbor to post a comment of any kind about a particular location that now is permitted with a short-term rental, be very aware we live in a very egregious, unaccountable, cancel culture environment. And somebody that simply doesn't like you can absolutely mess up something that is very good and have no accountability to anyone. So I would recommend that if you do have the ability via website or other kind of submission, to provide comments. You require the person to verify their identity. You can maintain that confidentiality, but make sure that you're not destroying the good name or reputation of a good person or destroying a viable business for the sake of serving somebody's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, and you all can just start coming forward.
Hi, I'm Lynn Stevenson. I live at 7406 Hill Avenue, just here downtown. And I didn't expect this, but I have a group of neighbors here who would like me to represent them. Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, so the time at 30 seconds, I think yellow.
Okay, I don't think I need 5 minutes, but I want to focus on one fundamental truth. Successful urban design requires diligent adherence to zoning. Zones come with rules and expectations. When you buy a home in a residential zone, you're confident about the quality of life that you can expect. Residential zones are separate from commercial zones in order to maintain a sense of community within neighborhoods and also to ensure adequate housing is available. We bought our home in a residential zone, so we know that we won't find ourselves living next door to a barber shop or an auto mechanic or a hotel. That's because residential zones are for residents, not transients. A resident is someone who resides here. They call their space home. They know and respect their neighbors. They can vote. They have an investment in the community, whether they are property owners or long-term tenants. By allowing non-resident STRs, and let's call them what they are, they're hotels. By allowing these hotels into all zoned neighborhoods, you're blurring the lines between residential and commercial zones and eroding the original intent of why zoning exists in the first place. Wow. Thank you. With even a very quick search on the internet, you'll discover many complaints and damage that's been done to communities who have allowed the integration of occupied vacation rentals into their residential zones. It's undeniable. This is especially true, by the way, in towns. Consultant in Arizona reported, quote, tourism-oriented communities have been impacted the most by short-term rentals. While large cities and metro areas may be able to absorb some of the loss of units to STRs, the result in smaller towns is quite different, affecting the fabric and character of neighborhoods in whole communities and regions. You have the advantage of knowing challenges that other city councils are facing all over the world, really. You have the ability to prevent some of the issues that vacation rentals have created in other communities. Why don't we start by not allowing them in residential zones? Because, I'm just going to say it one more time, residential zones are for residents, not transients. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. I think there's a gentleman I think I'll do this with that.
Good evening. My name is Robin Carter. I'm a retired U.S. Army major, and my wife and I want our comments to be on record. She couldn't be here because she's a neonatal nurse practitioner and works 24-hour shifts. But first of all, I'd like to thank each of you, in particular, Jenny Wook, for keeping us informed of this investor developer motivated issue. We really appreciate each one of you. I know that Jenny had given us 3 choices in some of the information we received in terms of what we would like to put across. And so my wife and I do not want short-term rental businesses, as the former comment person just said, in our residentially zoned neighborhoods. Being a Quail Park resident for the last 34 years, and on our homeowners association board 5 times over those 3 decades plus, my wife, our neighbors, and I are acutely aware of trying to maintain the quality of life for our community throughout Gig Harbor. Over the last 3 decades, the density and traffic congestion has continued to challenge and in some cases degrade the integrity and quality of our community without the concomitant increase of quality infrastructure to go along with them. Roads, water, and power are but a few of the necessary items that in some cases have not, and in other cases cannot be commensurately upgraded or increased. Additionally, the transient nature of many rentals over time will often degrade the quality of life for most of our Gig Harbor residents who treasure, and this is our quote, the gem of the Pacific Northwest. We count on each of your leadership as city council members to put the wishes and desires of the residents who live here in Gig Harbor ahead of the fiscal interests of investors and developers who do not live here or care about truly maintaining the quality of our life in Gig Harbor. As my great uncle used to say, as you wander on through life, whatever be your goal, keep your eye upon the donut and not upon the hole. We look at Gig Harbor as a treasure that we need to maintain. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carol Davis. And the city ordinance about short-term rentals as it is currently written would violate at least 3 of the Gig Harbor City Comprehensive Plan goals. Goal 3.6 of the plan is to retain and protect the unique character of historic businesses and residential neighborhoods within the harbor. The pending ordinance would destroy neighborhoods if we don't know our neighbors, or if the house next door is vacant for a long time. We can't rely on or socialize with people that we know and trust. Knowing your neighbors is an integral part of having a neighborhood. Goal 3.13 of the plan is to ensure that home-based businesses do not alter or impact the residential character of neighborhoods. And again, the pending ordinance would not ensure the quiet enjoyment of one's own property, as some of the people have attested. Goal 6.5 is to maintain affordable and attainable housing. The pending ordinance would do the opposite. If investors were allowed to buy any home as an STR, the price of housing would rise above market value. In case there was like a bidding war, investors have more money to spend than the average working families, and they can make cash offers way above market price. And that would definitely raise the price of housing for everyone. If the county were to allow short-term rentals in some form, I would suggest limiting the number of STRs to 1% of available housing in the city. And none in R1 zones, which, as someone has also mentioned, are for residences. And I think it would be wise to require the owner to live within 25 miles of the STR. Otherwise, we have a case of absent landlords, and we've all heard stories about how that works out. And so this way, the Gig Harbor could live up to the guidelines of their own comprehensive plan. Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Thank you for having us here. Appreciate it. I'm Dan Smith, and I live at 75 Way. Just a suggestion. You have a problem in front of you with the LLC. What if we prohibited LLCs from applying for that? I also sense that if this thing takes off and lots of we start to do this sort of thing, it's competition with our own materials and materials. We're trying to survive this situation. So, an age limit. What age limit is? It takes a person to be 18 to be an adult. Running up to an 18-year-old, yes. I don't discover these people that apply. I just go ahead and there are many different ways of listing services for STRs. Never come to and that's it. Oh, I would also say an acre and a quarter. If this decided, we're just going to go for this ST of it's just that's 8 of those things. Thanks for your time.
Yes, come forward.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Andonian, and I live at 3417 Fox Court.
If you want to
I'm just a little. Anyways, so my husband and I put up our house on Airbnb last year because we had a lot of medical problems, and we rented our house for 2 weeks, and that definitely helped pay the cost for our medical bills that are crazy. Anyways, we rented our 4-bedroom house and set it up in a way that we were super strict with our rules and only rented it to families. And we verified who stayed at our house and make sure they had good reviews and were travelers that, anyways, we also set it at a high rate that we knew that for people, I mean, someone who's going to pay for $700 a night, or someone who's going to take very good care of our home. We stay with my in-laws who live 2 miles away, so we were really across the way just in case of any issues. Anyways, all that to say is short-term rentals have been helpful for our families, and we don't maybe homes in Gig Harbor on Airbnb don't get rented all the time. Like especially in the winter. I think all I keep hearing is that houses are going to be rented over and over again. We really don't, because we've had a house up on Airbnb for months, and not a lot of people come here in the winter. Thing is, we just bought another home just north Gig Harbor in this November, and we're trying to start an adult family home. And we have to do some we just have to do some construction and apply for a license. And we are trying to Airbnb that house for a few months until we get our license to have an adult family home. And we have maybe like 6 to 8 months until we get that license, and we're trying to pay for a $6,000 mortgage on our house. So we haven't had any luck with Airbnb yet. And so we took it off because we're doing construction anyways. So short-term rentals, there should be there should be a whole list of policies, because I can totally see, oh no, I can totally see how it would be terrible for in the community, but I think it's also really beneficial if you're a resident and live like 2 miles away, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Edward Nadler, 9401 North Riverview Drive. Based on the numerous comments that the city received between January of last year through this January, if the proposed STR ordinance were put to a vote of the people, it would overwhelmingly be defeated. For those that haven't read all of the STR comments submitted to the city during that time, I'll summarize. Of Gig Harbor residents that commented are in favor of unfettered STRs in Gig Harbor. % wish to ban all STRs in Gig Harbor. 32% do not want STRs in residential zones. STRs should be restricted to commercially zoned areas. 8% are in favor of owned occupied or the previously defined STR ones. If the proposed ordinance were put to a vote of Gig Harbor residents, approximately 80% would vote against it. As representatives of all the citizens of Gig Harbor, I ask that you reject the proposed ordinance and go back to the drawing table. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Carrie Westover. I do live within the city limits. I have sent an email with actually everything that I want to say, so you've already heard it. I do want to say that I've been in a small neighborhood where only 20 homes in the gated community. 17 years now. I know that neighborhood. If anybody gets to I pick up the phone and call them and tell them to turn the music down. I have a problem. Looking for a short-term rental for some family coming in. Did we even find out that this home that had been sold was listed as a short-term rental property? No one knew about it. Our HOA, it's an old HOA covenant, and at that time we didn't. I don't know if that was on our radar to have to think about it. We're thinking about it now. It sounds like we're going to end up with a short-term rental ordinance. What I would like to ask is that we look at sizes of neighborhoods before they land short-term rentals. 21 homes is a really small neighborhood. If we had, I seriously excited by myself. Have that many in my neighborhood. So call the neighbor to tell them to turn around, we'd call the police. We'd have the police at our neighborhood and a lot more. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience? Yes, come forward.
Hi, Vicky Alsacker. I live at 9401 North Harborview Drive. And just to follow up on that comment, I spoke with neighbors 2 blocks up from me on Goodman Avenue who now have 2 STRs in their cul-de-sac, and there's not even a dozen homes. So this is coming. I'm here this evening to let you know that I'm not satisfied with the proposed short-term ordinance as it's written today. This is the current zoning map, which I'm sure you're all aware of, but I want to highlight for you is, we have 50% non-residential, and we have a very small residential component. And a good part, if you look at the websites, the VR short-term rentals are mainly in this area. There's several others. So it should be of no surprise to this council that a lot of the comments voting no and strictly no is because these people are in the front line and they're watching this happen right now. But essentially, I believe this is a rezoning without due process. By allowing business entities to co-op our residential neighborhoods until slowly our residential R1 zoning is converted into a residential business RB1 zone is unacceptable. The city has also failed its residential citizens by not implementing any infraction enforcement. And by that, I mean, nobody's talked about running these things without any permit. What's the fee going to be for that? The ordinance put forward would allow this use to be added to the land use matrix and would be given the dubious honor of having the most permitted use status of any use type. The P is across the board. Okay, also, if each and every one of us in this room were to convert our home into an STR, it would be essentially the same as obliterating this section of a neighborhood. We can't afford to lose our residential neighborhoods at that pace. Look, I am not against STRs. That said, there needs to be a limit in order to allow our residential neighborhoods to thrive. Our residential neighborhoods are already undersized per most planning guidelines. So after long hours of reading various community approaches, it's my opinion that capping the amount of STRs by district or area is a solution. I've heard 1%, I've read up to 6%. What's the right percentage per zone? But it is the only way you can stop from taking down an entire neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate the work that you're doing here. I'm relatively new to Gig Harbor. My name is Cecilia Claudio, and I came from Portugal. So I know that this area was founded by some of my ancestors. So for that, I feel very proud. Just 2 things that I've learned in business school. I have an MBA from Stanford. And 2 things that I would like to remind everybody, and that is you can manage what you can't measure. And so you cannot measure that everybody that's going to have an STR actually went through the due process. Will know what that's all about. And the second is the unintended consequences. And we should have thought about what it means long term to STRs in residential areas. And if those 2 things are not being considered or cannot be answered by this council, then I would say your work is not done. And you have a lot of work in front of you to answer those questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, come forward.
Hi, my name is Griffin Doan, and I apologize for being late. I just got off work and made it here. I'm 25 years old. My girlfriend and I scraped together all the savings that we had, and we operate one of the STR vessels down in the harbor. And I know that has been taken off of the proposed regulations, but I just wanted to share my experience. I was born and raised in Gig Harbor, Parkview Point. My parents since moved out to Fox Island. I've made my way back to Gig Harbor. I work here almost every day down on the water, taking care of the dock. We have 5 vessels, and getting to meet these people and hearing everyone's stories that comes through here. They're all supporting Gig Harbor. We have never had an issue down in the water. We have 5 vessels that are centralized in a very small space, and that's the dock. And on any given night, all of these boats are rented, and people love getting to meet each other if they do meet each other. And it's a great benefit to Gig Harbor. We see in our reviews that everyone is supporting local. Everyone is going out to dinner. They're getting a beer at the Tides before check-in time. The other thing I want to just say is that based on the numbers that we heard earlier, I was following on Zoom in the car. Less than 0.6% of all available housing in Gig Harbor are short-term rentals right now, 30 compared to 5,000. I don't see this as an issue, and I recognize the fear that people have, but I think there's been a fear that has come from people in power that go out in emails, and I just think that if people actually, got to know us and got to meet our guests. We have people from all over the world visiting Gig Harbor. They're great people. Never had an issue with our 5 rentals in downtown. I wasn't planning on talking, but this is all I want to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes. And feel free to move the microphone to where you need it for yourself.
My name is Carolyn.
Expectations and criteria.
Thank you. Yes. Go on.
I'm Michelle Bailey. And thank you for what you're doing. I know it's a lot of work and there are two sides to everything. What I've heard that is a lot of fear mongering, honestly, and not factually based, you know, Facebook polls and stuff that's not accurate or representative. And I've grown up here in Gig Harbor. I know that change is scary, but the world is changing and I feel like when we travel, I like to use Uber. Uber when I was in high school did not exist. We had to take a taxi. When I went to a hotel, that was my option when I traveled. You can stay in an Airbnb or a short-term rental where someone cares. You have someone who owns that place, take very good care of it. As you guys know, there have been 0 complaints in Gig Harbor. So I just caution you to not regulate a problem that does not exist. In Pierce County, as I'm sure you know, what you have to do is apply for a permit and submit the good neighbor pamphlet to the residents around you with your cell phone number. Problem about that. So my guidance to you guys is that you don't react with fear. You recognize that change is inevitable and that maybe there is a lot of good stuff that can come from families owning homes where they rent them out and they care so much. As I talk to somebody who makes chocolate chip cookies every time I check in. Really good people, and I just feel that if we overregulate, we are going to create a bigger problem. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anyone? Yes, go ahead. Bert.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Good to be with you this evening. Try not to be too salty tonight. Many concerned citizens and businesses appreciate your willingness to dig into the STR issues and do it a little bit deeper. And you've had to work through hype, hysteria, and it's been heaped on you. We totally get that. Some of that has been coming from within our own city, right? I mean, city employees is very unfortunate. We all know that this started with the emergency moratorium driven by special interests to stop the STRs. And in the spirit of a wonderful Super Bowl last night, we'll call them team status quo. And I really believe that that's what we're dealing with is team status quo here with their well-known mascot, NIMBY, not in my backyard. So we saw, I apologize, I'll read this a little bit clearer here. We see team status quo continue to hit. We see team status quo continue to hit STRs with false narratives, partial truths, limited information to frame STRs as a problem. In football, team status quo would have been flagged with multiple penalties for roughing the truth and interference with reality. Not good, but the damage had been done and the community began to divide. We don't believe this has been the intent of the mayor or most council members. So with substantial public and private data, we could all see by clear and convincing evidence, the anti-STR talking points had no basis in fact or reality.
Excuse me, just, a minute. Could you please state your name for the record?
Glenn Peterson.
Peterson, thank you very much.
So the real question is why all of the anti-STR propaganda? For Gig Harbor, this appears to be about three things. First, eliminating the about 25 STRs in the Millville and Finholm areas. Second, special interests that want to protect team status quo. And third, using disconnected policy arguments and complex regs to make the ownership of STRs impossible for middle-class families. Most of us have supported from the very beginning fair and reasonable STR regs. We live here. Our kids went to school here. This is our community. In my opinion only, I think the regs appear fair and reasonable in text, but a lack of clarity within the regs can allow for subjective application. This is a concern based on prior experience with how information is shared and applied. We asked the mayor and council to insist on greater clarity within STR regs. I provided some details in a letter sent to you earlier just for your consideration. These generally align to three areas. First being the permits. What are the timelines, costs? Can we cure problems in submitted permits? The second is enforcement details. What are the timelines for action, the warnings? Carl hit on some of this earlier, and I appreciate that very much. Is there a fine structure? What does that really look like? I am a little bit concerned with 120 days to process a permit. Third is the process. Can we ensure that it's simple and really try to prevent some onerous demands, extended timelines, and increased costs? If so, I think we're all better for it. So in closing, thank you for your work today. You recognize some that we're trying to bull rush you with anti-STR regs. By supporting STRs, you're supporting team, which includes citizens, businesses, tourism, the city, and those not wanting just to retain the character of Gig Harbor, but improve it where we can. We appreciate you working to find compromise to protect basic property rights. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay.
David Mumford. I live over by the Fox Island Bridge, but my wife and I have had rentals in Gig Harbor for over 22 years right up here on Soundview. Had a great experience with them. And I came here tonight to speak in favor of short-term rentals, even though we have no plans whatsoever to ever have a short-term rental. But I think it's a good land use. And I think that some short-term rentals of some type are a real asset to a town like Gig Harbor, and Gig Harbor needs to figure out how to accommodate them. I also listened to the concerns that I heard tonight, and there are some legitimate concerns that people are raising that need to be taken into account. And part of what goes through my mind about this ordinance is that we've got a potentially very difficult permit process in there, which would make getting an STR permitted very difficult. I would suggest to the council that that isn't the way it should be. What we should do is do the work now to spell out how we want STRs to work for Gig Harbor, and then make the permit system very simple. Don't use it as an artificial way to block STRs. Do the work up front to describe the STRs as we want them. STRs are here. I mean, they've been running for a long time. We need to know where they are. They need to be permitted, and we need to do a good job with it. And I feel like there's a lot of work that's got to be done on this whole thing, and we just haven't done it. There's a lot more that has to go into it, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you. I thought I saw a couple more hands raised. You can go ahead and come on forward.
Hello. I'm Janet Lee. I live in the city at 3403 West Avenue. West Avenue, the home of several STRs. And what I would there, weirdly. They're quiet. I have neighbors across the street from me and around our neighborhood, and they're snowbirds. Houses. Houses. People in houses. Houses. Are in the summer teams and it's huge breaker, but it's nice to have it. One thing that people really appreciate it, and they take care of it. We have it as a long-term rental for 18 years. So we look out when is out of and she gets to come up and see kids that she has here and her kids. She has a place to come and stay. She has the extra income. She manages it. So it's really helpful for her. It's a destination. Cities in the state that we are compared to. Do. Sales tax back into seasons. So it just it's that wanted to stay for 2 weeks and have this destinations. Speak.
Yeah, yes, go ahead and come on.
Thank you for all the hard work you did over here. I know you guys are in the trenches, digging, answering questions. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I want to start by saying something I heard just recently, something about fear mongering. Providing factual information about an ordinance that summarizes what is going to happen potentially with the ordinance, the way it is written, is not fear mongering, it's transparency. And I appreciate that. And that's why I'm here. I am not against STRs. In fact, I owned an STR, I lived in an STR, and I was a superhost. The only reason why I owned it because I retired and I needed the supplemental income after I retired. The only thing that got in the way was COVID. And so when COVID happened, I decided I'm going to just stay and live in Gig Harbor and not do the STR thing. So I'm against STRs. What my concern is, my glasses, is the vast majority. I heard something like there's 30 STRs currently. I don't know that you really can even know that based on what I'm hearing here. It sounds like there's a lot more than that that are being done. I'm not against that either. I'm against unlimited, unregulated, and very difficult to regulate and find out what's going on with the STRs that are there. There's no agreement. What's existing, I don't want to hurt anyone who needs the supplemental income or has, hit because all of a sudden that they need help with. By all means, I'm for that, but I didn't hear a real good plan to address a lot of the things that can come up with these SDRs. And this is not a diss on the people who did the work. It's a complex issue. So I ask, who are we serving on? Are we serving the 30 people and maybe how many more? I don't know. It depends on the ordinance. Or are we serving the whole of Gig Harbor? And what I'm hearing and what I've heard from people in my neighborhood is we don't want more STRs. There's an unregulated or undocumented STR in my neighborhood. It happens to be one of those where somebody actually is a songbird, not a snowbird, and leaves to go someplace in the summer they leave. And when we're gone for 3 or 4 months, their property was a mess. And when you're here, it's wonderful. And it was an eyesore in the neighborhood. So we have all these anecdotal things we can say about pros and cons. I think we need to put a moratorium on it until we have all the questions answered, and we need to limit it. All the residential areas, they can go someplace else and come in downtown. We have a robust, it seems to me, a tourist city. It's a wonderful, beautiful city. I absolutely love Gig Harbor. Thank you for letting me live here. Thank you for the hard work you do, but please wait until we have all these things answered. Don't make it unlimited. Be able to control it. Or once you don't, well, the cat's out of the bag. So thank you very much for your time.
Mayor, we need the speaker's name, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Nancy Coyle, I live in Gig Harbor.
She's in the resident. Okay, thank you so much. Sorry, a hand in the back. Yes, please come forward.
Excuse me. My name is Tim Seamus. I am a city resident and pay city taxes. I would,
If you can have the microphone up closer, thank you so much.
I would encourage you to be as restrictive as possible with STRs. If you can always loosen it up, tightening it up later at another time will be much more difficult. We didn't really even think about this until our neighbors moved and they put their house out for a short-term rental. We had problems with parking, garbage, noise especially, and security. You don't really know who the people are that are renting. They may be wonderful people, they may not. You don't know. And what they find out about you when they're living in your neighborhood, even short-term, may not be to your advantage. So I would encourage you to be as restrictive as possible. We've also seen when we were in Lisbon last year, what short-term rentals do for the housing market. Because everyone would complain that we worked with, that the houses were no longer available for them to buy because they were all being used for short-term rentals because people make money off the short-term rentals. So they felt very bad that they couldn't buy a house. They had to sleep 4 and 5 to an apartment. And I don't think that's what we're here for. If you want a community, you have to work at making that a community. And if you don't know who your neighbors are, you don't have a community. So that's what I've got.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else in the audience wish to speak? Okay, seeing no hands, we'll go to our online audience. The first hand that I see is Richard. If you would please state your full name for the record, you can press *6 to unmute yourself if you're on the phone.
Okay, I pressed unmute.
Yes, we can hear you.
First, I'd like to say that for the Zoom audience, the audio is pretty unintelligible on this end. I think the volume is, I think it's okay for the room, but it's overpowering for the Zoom audience, so we're not hearing most of what you're saying. But my name is Richard Moser, and I would like to have my thoughts regarding proposed ordinance 1507, made a matter of public record. While my mailing address is Gig Harbor, I do not live within the city limits. However, I'm still concerned about ordinances like this one because I believe they tend to be referenced by other jurisdictions as justifications for creating similar regulations of their own. Excuse me. My wife and I operate 2 short-term rentals in Tacoma. The only requirement there The only requirements there are to obtain a permit to operate rental property and comply with existing zoning, safety, and health laws. It should be noted that only one permit is required regardless of the number of rentals owned. There are no other restrictions. I believe Tacoma's regulations are reasonable. I think proposed ordinance 1507 is not. Please consider a simple scenario. I own a house in Gig Harbor, but will be traveling and will not be home for a month. I have a brother who is married and has 2 children. I choose to let him and his family stay in my house for 2 weeks while I am not there. Should the city of Gig Harbor be able to tell me this is illegal? How is this any different from offering my home to the public as a short-term rental? The impact to the neighborhood and the city will be exactly the same in either case. Additionally, I do not understand why this type of business, short-term rental, is being singled out for a restriction as to the number of businesses that may be operated. Gig Harbor Municipal Code 5.10.010 states that adult entertainment facilities are detrimental to the public health, safety, and welfare. Yet based on existing Gig Harbor city ordinances, it appears there's no restriction on the number of adult entertainment businesses I could operate in Gig Harbor. However, proposal 1507 would limit me to operating only one short-term rental. This does not seem fair or logical. The city has done some research and cited concerns about loss of affordable housing, parties, and parking. Assuming that these issues even exist in Gig Harbor, proposal 1507 will have no impact on solving them. While it's tempting to try to formulate rules that will solve all of life's problems, property ownership and various living situations are far too complex to anticipate all of the unintended consequences that Ordinance 1507 would cause while property owners are simply trying to enjoy their property rights. This ordinance would just make existing city ordinances more complicated, add costs to city operation, strip rights from property owners, and do nothing to improve the lives of citizens. Proposed ordinance 1507 should not be adopted. Thank you.
Is there anyone to make the audio louder, but we move or no? Just two. This is for the troubleshoot us in.
Hello, can you hear me? I'm Jackie Olivier, 3316 Harborview Drive. I've lived here for over 20 years in my home with neighbors we had next door that we knew for many years. Now we had a neighbor move out. There was multiple offers on their home, all done by people that wanted to buy and use as a rental. I will not know who my neighbors are. I do not know who's coming in and out the driveway. And I've done a lot of research online about cities that have gone into these short-term rentals and now are regretting it. Ocean Shores in the city has just stopped all people renting out their homes for vacation rentals. If you buy a house, you cannot use it as a vacation rental. If you build a house, you cannot use it as a vacation rental. Arizona is the same problem. It's going on all over the country. These big corporations such as Airbnb, VRBO, and such are putting in tons of money into getting these turned over so they can take over our cities. I want our neighborhood to stay a neighborhood. I don't want to not know who's living next door. I don't want to know who's coming and going. I have people walk by my house and they say, oh, we love walking by in Gig Harbor. We love to see the neighbors outside in their gardens. I'm not going to see that with short-term rentals next door. No one's going to be out digging in their garden or giving some of their plants away to people that walk by. I think this is a storm that's going to open, and we're going to regret if we do go ahead and allow all these short-term rentals. And also, when I bought my home, it was R1. I've already been changed across the street to R3 or whatever it is, zoning. Why even have zoning, or when you can just change it as you want? So now I won't be in R1, but my neighbors will be whatever it is you will change it to for short-term rentals, like a hotel. I don't want to live next to a hotel. I want to live in a neighborhood the way I bought it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I went to the bathroom when the last person was speaking. And when I got back, you went to the audio, so I apologize for that. Yes, okay. Can you hear? Sure. Thank you for taking the time to allow all of us to make our comments, pros and cons and everything in between. I appreciate your willingness to take a proactive, long-term look at what's going to happen to this town that we live in. You have the benefit of learning from other communities, large and small. And I think you need to look at that with a very critical eye. My recommendations are keep corporate interests out of Gig Harbor. They don't live here. They're not invested in the long term. Grandfather the short-term rentals that exist today and in residential areas. Keep short-term rentals to commercial areas only, docks included. I like that idea. And Lynn Stevenson, I'm not part of her neighborhood, but I really absolutely agree with everything that group came up with. I'd like to keep the community that I live in today, from not becoming a transient kind of neighborhood. I think that's really important for all of us. And again, thanks for the opportunity to talk. I apologize. It's because I didn't say it. No, I didn't. It's Lynn Gonzalez. I live on Mountain View Place.
Okay, thank you so much. And also, in-person minutes on the list. Let's proceed on.
Do you have Bonnie O'Malley now? Well, this is Bonnie O'Malley, and you're accustomed to hearing from me. I know you're going to be disappointed because you've done such a great job. She started screen sharing. You've done such a great job of, Josh, you have to take off the screen sharing or I can't read this. You've done such a great job of asking a lot of great questions tonight, so you've kind of blown my little spiel away. But I'm just going to say that the problem is not STRs. There are no corporate investors looking to invest here. To date, those who are operating have only brought positive effects to our community. You've seen letters from renters testifying to that. You have heard from local businesses testifying to that. You have zero complaints, and yet we continue to try to legislate regulations for a problem that does not exist. The problem is the origin of the moratorium. It's a handful of not in my backyard residents who banded together using political connections to create the tempest through the innuendo and fear mongering. And yes, it is that. It's in an effort to deny our city all of the positive benefits that STRs bring to our community. The backbone of the opposition is one council member who is advocating for them with total inaccuracies and fabrications. And I will say that again, total inaccuracies and fabrications that are marketed publicly, strictly to influence the process. I stated in my written letter that I've sent in that we might have a workable proposal in Ordinance 1507. We might, but then we were notified by administration that existing land use codes would be the criteria for which all processes would be defined. I then investigated the language of using the land use codes for defining the processes of application, regulation, and non-compliance, and they do not work. We need detailed definition of processes in advance. We need to know all of the expectations of the administration. We need reasonable fees and reasonable penalties for non-compliance that are in keeping with every other residence in the community. Why can't we just lift the moratorium, simplify the processes, let STRs get on with providing positive services to our community, and just put sanctions in place that will deal with those who don't comply? Why should our businesses be singled out for discriminatory regulation? And last but not least, in my opinion, with the moratorium in place and the inability to obtain a permit or license, we are not illegal. We are merely in limbo. The majority want to be legal. And once this ordinance is in place, we believe that a 90-day grace period for applications is appropriate. Ordinance 1507 is defective. Let's simplify it and let's get it done. Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the next hand raised looks like Bob Himes. I don't know if you'd state your name.
Yes, good evening. My name is Bob Himes. I'm a resident of Gig Harbor. I'm residing at 6507 115th Street Court, Gig Harbor. And I'll divert from my script here and say I was in the September 21st meeting of the Planning and Building Committee. There was no conspiracy. It was 3 humble council members looking at what might happen if the rise in short-term rentals were to go nonlinear, which it had in several other communities. For example, Napa Valley was the one that I always quoted. We have the luxury, by the way, right now at our disposal to pass ordinances to prevent the messes that they got into. They're playing catch up. The intent of Ordinance 1507 is stated in section 17.85.01 called intent. And in there are 3 items, okay? Permit residents to offer their residences as short-term rentals subject to reasonable city regulations. Therein lies my first problem. The intent was to permit residents, and somehow we ended up with everybody joining the party here. Corporations could come in here, limited liability outfits, LLCs, there's no end. And by the way, they're designated representatives. It goes on and on and on. It was very simple the way this thing started. I think we need to get back to that. Protect neighborhoods from potentially adverse impacts of short-term rentals. You've heard many of them here tonight. The big one that we were trying to deal with is what happens when you basically overwhelm a neighborhood, let alone a city, with STRs. And we were really nervous about that. I noticed again in the section 030 and 040, there is no limits put in there, either on the number in a given area, which would be density, or even probably more important is spacing. Do you put all these things together in one mess, or do you spread them out somehow within a community and kind of dilute them in the neighborhood? So I think there's a big disconnect between the intents here and what's in sections 030 and 040. The last one, minimize potential impacts on long-term housing availability, attainability. There's nothing in here that addresses that. There's no limit, there's nothing. So where I'm at is, hey, this is a good start. I know it's taken a lot of time and effort, but I believe that it needs to be carried through with basically the actions are consistent with the intent. And by the way, I would strongly recommend continuing the moratorium if that's what's necessary to get that done. The market right now is such that with the moratorium,
Hello, Steve Chapman once again. The audio has gone different, so I assume you're hearing me.
Yes, if you could speak up, that would be great.
Didn't understand a word of that. So, like I said, my name's Steve Chapman. I live at 2829 Harbor View Drive. My wife and I bought this place 10 years ago, and we use it. We used it as a vacation property while I was still working. We remodeled, and we now live here full time. But during that time, we had set the place up. Well, we had interviewed a number of different vacation rental companies, and we settled on Vacasa. And honestly, the one benefit I got out of it was that it earned enough money to pay for about half of my yearly expenses on the place. But the negatives definitely outweighed the positives in terms of they did a poor job cleaning the place. We'd come in and we'd see coffee stains on the carpet, or Cheerios and dried milk in the carpet. We found that there was theft, things would disappear. They made promises they wouldn't keep, like they would inspect it immediately after they were here. The renters were here, and they never did that. And so, you know, as I look at these large companies talking about doing STRs, I'm not a fan, because I've experienced them and have regretted having done that. All that said, I appreciate the efforts you're doing on trying to wrap your arms around STRs. I think they should be allowed, but I think they should be regulated and not just be allowed to operate carte blanche here in the city. So the biggest thing I noticed within what I've read so far is that there's basically no code enforcement. I heard the discussion earlier, but I have the Seven Seas Tavern 2 doors down from me, and the city has done a very poor job of dealing with parking and noise regarding them. And so I don't see them doing anything any different with an SDR that's going haywire. So y'all need to beef that up and take care of the neighbors so that they feel like they've got some rights to their own neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in our online audience that wishes to speak tonight? I saw a hand and then it went down. If you're on the phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand, or the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Okay. Oh. Well, I'll check back. Yeah, it looks like I'm Linus, maybe trying to raise their hand. All right. Is there anyone else in our audience here in person that would like to speak? Yes, okay, come forward, please.
My name's Cara Sandvik and I live in Gig Harbor.
Could you put the microphone close to you?
How about now? Sandvik and I live in Gig Harbor. I have had an apartment in my house in Gig Harbor for several years. And the apartment we have been, my family and I have been renting as an Airbnb, VRBO. And when we started it in 2019, we called the city and we were trying to be legal, but we couldn't figure out, we couldn't get anyone in the city to say that there was anything that we should do. So we didn't even realize that there was something to follow. And that's been part of our problem, is knowing what to do. It has been a very successful operation. Mostly what we have is we've got a 7-day minimum, so we don't have a fast turnaround. We don't allow for anyone to park on the street. Most of the people that we've had are actually retirement age, and they're visiting family, or they're remodeling a home, or they're moving here so that they can look for a house. So it's been really successful and they act as if it feels as if they live in the community. Most of them are long-term, stay around. And so they are good neighbors. That's it.
Thank you very much. Okay, I see a hand raised online. Kimberly? And if you could please state your full name in case I did not get that correct.
Hi. Hi. So my name is Stefan Andonian. I am Kimberly's husband, but I obviously have an Airbnb experience too. So I was born and raised in Gig Harbor. Well, I was born in Bellevue, but I lived in here ever since I was 4 years old. So I know what it feels like to live inside the community, and all the people that I've had stay over at my Airbnb have all been old families that completely fit in with the community. If anything, everyone has pretty much been family members of someone that they're visiting inside the harbor. And so I know that there's fear going on with people, but when you actually get to the real experiences, it's families that are coming in. And anyone who has an expensive Gig Harbor home, you're not going to have college kids come trash it. Nobody wants that. If the neighbors are scared of that, then how much more the person that has to foot the bill for the damages. In my experience with Airbnb, it hasn't been as a business. I haven't accumulated Airbnbs. What my family's done is when we are extremely tight on funds, we have decided to go on a trip and Airbnb our house out in the meantime, which enables us the flexibility to go visit my wife's parents in California and not have to go into debt for it. Another thing that we're doing is we're starting an adult family home in however long it takes. And so it's just for us to be able to furnish a home and not go bankrupt while we're waiting. For everyone who doesn't want to have short-term rental, I guess that works if you're super, super rich and you have a lifetime's worth of savings. But for everyone else who relies upon all the income streams they can scratch together to give their family a good life, like Airbnbs offer a fantastic flexible avenue that has allowed my family to just do things that we couldn't otherwise. I mean, in the future, like if I get laid off by my job, one of our thoughts is that we could move in with my parents who live down the street and Airbnb our house to that'd probably bring in a few $1,000s a month and we could not go bankrupt significantly faster. So I mean, there's people who think of it as like, I'm scared and so I don't want to have the potential for something bad to happen. But they don't realize that they're for example, do people want me to go bankrupt while I'm waiting for my adult family home to be approved? It's just this stuff it would impact my family tremendously, and the fears aren't even realistic. So that's all I have to say. Thank you guys for listening. Sorry for jabbering on for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I saw that person trying again, but I don't know that they're going to make it. Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands raised online at the moment. Anyone else in the audience tonight that wishes to speak? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. I want to thank all of you so much for being here and providing your thoughts online as well. There will not be public comment taken at the second reading because the hearing is closed, but each of the comments will be accepted until the 27th and read by the council that is sent to everybody. So please, if you don't get to finish your comment and you have additional comments, you can email those to the city clerk. Is it city clerk? Yes, so city clerk at gigharbor.gov to send any future comments, and those will be passed on to myself and the council. So I will open it up for council deliberation. And when the direction that you need from council this evening.
Well, thank you, Mayor. The only direction requested from council this evening is to direct us to schedule this for second reading on the 27th of February.
I will start. Councilmember Harrison.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'd like to start out thanking Director DeSimas and his staff for all the work. It's hard work. I know you've been through a lot, and writing this stuff up takes a lot of time. It's pretty darn clear the STR issue is complex. There's no easy answer. My feeling is that this ordinance is written with maybe some minor tweaks is a really good start to put STRs under some sort of regulation. And it's an incremental one. And I prefer incremental changes versus trying to hit a home run. I don't think we should expect to hit a home run with this ordinance because, like I said, it's a very complex project. We have built-in checkpoints, which I think is quite good in this process. So we get this out, we visit it in a quarter, maybe three months, and then we can adjust it on the fly. And I think that's the wisest way to get this done and get it done well. My two requests would be to look at very carefully at requirements on STRs, actually strict requirements on STRs, but not normally apply to long-term rentals. For instance, parking and traffic impacts. I could easily see, and I've seen across the street from me, a long-term rental with over 5 people in it. It's a big house. They've all got cars, and yet the city doesn't require anybody to do a traffic impact study. I could imagine the same thing with a water or sewage. There's a lot of people in that house now. So I think we should try to be as fair as we can with people that are running long-term rentals and short-term rentals, not to make one more onerous than the other. I think the second thing is if we can look at simplifying the code a little bit. I understand the code needs to be written on as a legal basis, and it's written as such, and I would expect that. But I think it would be nice to see some other written document that just simplifies it a little bit more. Maybe we could look at how Tacoma has done their short-term rental and maybe take some tidbits from them as well. So again, and I would love to see this come back again for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Look.
Yes, thank you. To our staff, thank you so much for working on this and putting it together. To our citizens who came this evening and who've spoken, to those citizens online who've spoken, thank you for speaking up for your neighborhood, your hometown. Our city council has received over 124 emails from Gig Harbor citizens within the city limits from January 1st to January the 19th. 124 citizens, 107 of those citizens said no to STRs within the city residential neighborhoods. 26 of the 107 said no to residential neighborhoods, but okay in commercial neighborhoods would be fine. 8 within the city limits said, yes, bring them on. And 1 of the 8 said, yes, have them, but with regulations. 33 additional folks responded outside of the city limits, and 7 did not share their address. So I think that's pretty good data. If you need some more data, when I was reelected to the city council recently, one item of my campaign platform was that Gig Harbor city residents should have more say over their neighborhoods than folks who do not live in the city limits. And my platform and myself was reelected to the city council with 74% of the voters in Gig Harbor. I think that's a pretty clear-cut direction of what our citizens want to see. If there's still a question of what our citizens want, we can always go out to a advisory vote and put this on hold, which is possible. So from the folks we have heard tonight, even the folks who are in favor of this ordinance think it needs more work. Obviously, the folks, which are in the majority of the folks speaking tonight, are not in favor of this ordinance, and they don't want this to happen in Gig Harbor. So I'm going to make a motion. And I move to direct staff to come back to council with a new ordinance that supporting our small business and quality of life in residential neighborhoods. Clearly, our voters want to see short-term rentals in resident and commercial zones only. That is an option. I think our voters would support full-time occupied in residential zones. Let these folks live there and let you know them. Another option would be a residing owner for 9 months in residential neighborhoods and allow short-term rentals for 3 months.
Mayor, can I have a point of order? We need to know what the motion is. There seems to be several options coming.
Okay. Sure. So I need to know, I guess this is it. I have a couple of different ones here. Can I make all these different motions? And all right, so I will start. I have about 4 different options here. So the first one is, I move that we have an extension of the moratorium and bring back a new ordinance with short-term rentals in commercial zones only and not in residential neighborhoods. And I hope I'll get a second on that.
Is there a second?
Okay, so moving along, I will make another motion. And I move then to allow short-term rentals full-time occupied only in residential zones and unoccupied in commercial zones. I'd be happy to have a second on that.
Is there a second?
Okay, I'll have another motion. I move that we allow a residing owner in a residential neighborhood for 9 months of the year and for 3 months of the year, unoccupied short-term rentals can be in residential neighborhoods with unoccupied 12 months of the year in commercial zones. And I'd love to see a second on that.
Is there a second?
So another option, another motion that I have then is to extend this moratorium for 6 months while we follow the direction of all of our citizens asking us to delve into this a little bit more and come back with something that's easy to understand and that is and that fits in with our community and our businesses. And I hope I get a second on that one.
Is there a second?
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Councilmember Barber?
Yes, I want to echo the thanks, especially to staff and to everyone who's been working on this moratorium for the last year and 4 months or 5 months, however long it's been. One of the things that I find most interesting and challenging about serving on city council is the amount of things that I'm learning about the intricacies of our government and how it works. And it's really incredible to learn everything that we've been learning over the last year. One of the things that I enjoy the most is meeting with people in the city who love the city as much as we do. And it's really interesting to meet with everybody. And I think I can speak for everyone up here that we will meet with anybody who wants to meet with us. Issues like this can be extremely challenging. As we heard tonight, there are not 2 sides to the story. There are about 150 sides to this story. And I think change is hard. And whenever we're dealing with change, we have to figure out, as leaders of this city, we have to figure out the best way that we can make the change for the future of the city. And part of that does come from listening to you. It comes from listening to our staff. And it comes from figuring out the best way that we can make change to move forward as a city. So I also wanted to mention, I think it's really important that everybody who's here tonight know that we have all read all of the comments that have come in over the past year and a half. There have been more than 300 different households who have written to us about short-term rentals. And I think that that is really remarkable, and it's been fascinating to read all the different viewpoints. So I really believe that change is hard, but it is a constant. And I hope that what we can do with this moratorium is really going to bring us together, because I do believe that we are one Gig Harbor. And what I would like to ask staff if they can do with this, with 1507, is try to figure out a way that we can refine what we called in the study session, option 4A, that was the one per permit, one short-term rental per person, so that we can try to figure out if there's a way that we can limit an LLC having 15 owners, that kind of, I'd like to solve that problem if we can moving forward. That's my one request moving forward, but I'm looking forward to seeing this on the agenda on February 27th.
Thank you. Councilmember Likens.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I also want to echo thanks to everyone. This is a complex, contentious issue. There's a lot at stake. There's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of feelings that come with this when we're talking about neighborhoods, when we're talking about protecting the quality of our neighborhoods, but also we're also talking about people's money and ability to potentially stay in their homes, which we also take very seriously. To pass an ordinance that puts people out of business that there's been no complaints for is a serious thing, and we do not take that lightly. That being said, I want to say that I echo, I believe, Councilmember Barber and Councilmember Henderson's comments, that I think we're close. I think that after all this work, I think we can hear all sides of this issue and take this into account, and we can tweak it so that we can balance preserving the residential qualities of our neighborhoods, making sure we have adequate housing, and allow for economic development opportunities for both our community and property owners. So I think that we are really close, and I'd like to see this come forward for a reading at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Martin.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to echo the praise of the staff again. I have been in this seat for a very short period of time, and I keep telling everyone how impressed I am with everyone at Gig Harbor. It is incredible to see what it takes to run a city, and you are a shining stars to make sure that the city is being run well. So thank you for that. Secondly, I also want to reiterate that I appreciate all the residents' comments. I have read all of them. And it's been very eye-opening to hear what everyone has had to say, regardless of what sides, not two sides, I heard, what sides you might be on. I really do take it to heart, and trying to figure this out is very difficult. Lastly, I guess I would ask staff, I would go with Representative Barber, Councilmember Barber, that I'd like to see if something could be done in regards to multiple ownership with large businesses or LLCs or corporations coming in to purchase more than one or two, if you will, short-term rentals. I don't know if that's something that can be done, but I would like to see if that could be done so we can ensure that we're having more residents. We heard from a lot of people who have short-term rentals and are doing this in a way to either make ends meet, be able to have some opportunities for their families to come visit, et cetera. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you. Councilmember Rodenberg.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to bring this back for second reading on February 27th. I think at that time, any amendments to it, such as anything that Councilmember Barber had mentioned as far as an extra tweak, can be made then, but I'd like to make that motion.
Seconded by Councilmember Barber. I see Councilmember Starslet, you have your light on.
Yes,
lots to process tonight. As much as the emails, it's, you know, a bit of a refresher and great to see people in person. So strongly encourage you to come back on other issues that we have. I would I would also like to echo some of the last council members that spoke, that I would like to see this come back forward, having something around, you know, corporations or LLC, if that's something we're really concerned about, putting something in there. I still think I'd like to see something more than one option, you know, if you're an owner, having more than one STR. So if that's 2 or 3, I don't know if I need to propose a amendment at this point, but
Yes, that would be right now.
okay, do we have to vote on his?
We do need to vote
Yeah.
on the motion on the floor. So there's a motion. The motion to move the ordinance forward.
I don't know. Yes. Yes, I am. I'm making it, I'm proposing an amendment. So thank you for your patience. So I'd like to make an amendment to alter 41A to 3 short-term rentals per permittee.
Well, so just, sorry to jump in, I hate to do this, but that is totally different than the motion that's on the floor. And so if there's, right now it's to bring it back, amendments can be made at that time, assuming.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally agree. So
Oh,
I didn't know exactly how it would go either, but right now it would have to be amendment on bringing it back, like you wanted 2 weeks later than that, or something like related to that motion.
Okay.
No, the motion.
So you're gonna have to have the second.
Gotcha. Then
Yes.
I'm taking it back. All right. That's trying my
Mayor,
That's my amendment.
if I can interrupt here. The motion that Councilmember Rodenberg made is not a necessary motion because it's in council's rules. So if Councilmember Rodenberg would like to withdraw his motion, then if there are any amendments that would like to be proposed at this time, we can accept those.
I withdraw my motion. And let's make sure.
If any council member would like to make amendments to the motion or to the ordinance to be brought back for second reading, they can do so at this time.
All right, let's try this again. I'm glad the audience is a little smaller, but at least you could more entertainment. Amendment to 14A. Am I getting the right one right now? First. Okay, 4A. That we change it from 1 permittee to 1 STR, from 1 permittee to 3 STRs.
I second that.
Okay, seconded by Councilman Rodenberg. Okay, so. Okay, so motion is to 3 short-term rentals.
And Mayor, just real quick, we're gonna find the exact section here. Because 4A was the reference from the study session, right? Yeah, so it is in there, but let's find.
At point of order, will we have deliberation?
Yes.
So that would be an amendment to 1785-030A2.
Can I just agree with you? Is that?
Capture.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm going to take that back. Jeremy just noted it's 1785-040C.
C.
Apologies.
No worries.
7 of 16.
Okay. Okay, so I have a motion and a second, council, I see. Councilmember Wook.
Yes, thank you. So currently, this ordinance says that for members of an LLC, each member of the LLC can have 1 short-term rental. This amendment would allow each member of an LLC or any corporation to have 3 short-term rentals. Also, it would be to allow every investor to have 3, as many as 3 short-term rentals. So this is not something I'll be supporting.
Councilor Robert, do you have that item? As well as Councilmember Stursett? Okay. Okay, so I'm saying you're right, so I have a motion and a second, and those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, I'm gonna do a roll call vote on that. Councilmember Wook,
Nay.
Councilmember Stursett, Councilmember Roder,
Aye.
Councilmember Likens,
Nay.
Councilmember Henderson,
Nay.
Councilmember Martin,
Nay.
Councilmember Garber.
Nay.
Okay, so the motion does not pass. This time. Councilmember, I think you were first.
I don't think I have an amendment because I don't know how to word the amendment. City Attorney Kenny, no.
Is this regarding the
The LLC, yes. I would like to get some guidance between now and the 27th on what we might be able to do in that regard.
We would recommend that a motion not be made this evening. We need to discuss with the city attorney prior to offering advice to council, but we'll make sure that that's done prior to the packet for the 27th.
Perfect, thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Henderson?
Thank you. That was my exact request too, because this seems to be a sticking point. So some of our votes that were against the limiting to 1 or 3, it was not that. It was just, we need to find a way so that LLCs I don't think they're here, whether they'll ever come or not, but I would like to see some way that we can kind of limit that to something normal versus having them buy out large swaths. So whether that happens or not, I don't know, but I think we need to look at it very, very closely. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Stursett?
Yes, thank you. I agree with you, Councilmember Henderson. My understanding is that we were giving direction of doing something to look at the LLC portion. So mine was more of still a 1-for-1, not thinking all of the members. So thank you.
Councilmember Rodenberg?
Yes, I'd like to suggest that should the LLC or the corporate issue be found to be something that we cannot do legally, or if we find that we can eliminate that somehow, then I'm going to revisit the more than 1 up to 3, and that will eliminate the LLC issue, and it'll allow the not saying it derogatorily, but it'll allow the mom and pop that happens to have a couple family homes to rent those out. So it wouldn't be big corporate entities.
Thank you. Councilmember Likens?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I was just going to echo the comments that have been made and say I agree. I just want some more clarification about what we can do to allow our local owners to continue, but limit possibility of corporate owners coming in. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilmember Stursett and Rodenberg? Okay, I'm just making sure, you guys do this to me. I don't know. I'm not seeing any other lights on. So I'm assuming that there are no other amendments. Okay, all right. Thank you, everyone, again, staff, council. Thank you for being here online as well as in person. This is a tricky issue, and I don't envy the council's decision, but appreciate you are making your comments, and have a wonderful evening. Just a second, we still have, we're done with this.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick report. On the 6th of February, I, along with Councilmember Martin and Councilmember Likens, attended the Gig Harbor for Racial Justice Coalition Stories of Racism at the Key Center, Pierce County Library. The stories were really moving and especially more moving since they were examples from our own city. Just remind you, if you missed that event, which was, it was a bit of a hike to get out there. There's two more events of similar nature happening here in Gig Harbor. One's February 7th to the 28th at the Angus Day Lutheran Church. And the next one is March 3 to 26 at St. John's Episcopal Church. So it's very well worth the visit just to see what's going on and read that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rodenberg.
Yes, I have a couple things. One, I'm the Government Affairs Liaison to the Chamber of Commerce. Last Tuesday, we had a meeting in which we discussed their legislative priorities, which are closely aligned with the city's priorities. And I updated them as far as all the bills that had occurred thus far this session in regard to the city's priorities. They're going to share a few of theirs that I will bring back to the city. So that group is going very well. Additionally, I took on 4 more responsibilities this last week. 2 of them are hard work and 2 of them are going to be fun. The hard work one is I was appointed to by Penn Met to sit on the feasibility advisory board to help find a permanent location for seniors and so-called senior center. So, for lack of a better word at this time. So I'm looking forward to serving on that. The other one is I was asked to join the board of directors of a sister city program through the Rotary. And this sister city will have to do with a town in Croatia called Bach, which is an island. And a lot of our founding citizens, founding of Gig Harbor, are from that particular island. So I look forward to serving on that committee and maybe a junket to Croatia. But it's still going to be hard work. The other 2 items that are strictly fun is I was asked by the city to be a judge at the chili cook-off that the Public Works is going to be doing in the next week or so. And the other one is I was asked to be a judge for the wastewater treatment plant. Their little get-together and picnic that involves a car show. So the city employees are starting to get back and have been for some time to enjoying themselves, taking pride in their jobs and being happy at work. And really glad to say that. So I guess that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't see any other lights on. Announcement of upcoming items is attached to your agenda as well as to your strategic plan. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Hey.
All right.